neither the Election Commission nor the Union government has said how many quote-unquote illegal immigrants have been identified.
There is lack of clarity about the legal sanction for a special intensive revision. Where is the financial approval for this from Parliament? How much money have you actually obtained permission to spend? That is not there.
You have in Bihar the Chief Minister threatening that your bank accounts will be, will be confiscated. A, that this is not a citizenship determination exercise. B,
hello and welcome to Deccan Herald. Today we are having a special discussion on the SIR issue. As you all know, it's been 2 weeks since SIR was rolled out in Karnataka and lakhs of people have been facing various problems related to this exercise. Right from filling up their forms correctly, to locating their names on the original 2002 list, to also mapping themselves properly to their relatives who are on the 2002 list, a lot of people are running helter-skelter and are really confused. To make this matter worse, BLOs themselves are not adequately trained and this is also adding to the confusion. To know more about this issue as well as to understand what are the larger ramifications for people who stay out of this electoral roll for whatever reasons, we have two experts with us today. We have Mr. Venkatesh Nayak, the Director of Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and we have Mr. Clifton D. Rosario, a lawyer, a member of the My Vote My Right campaign, as well as the General Secretary of All India Lawyers Association for Justice. Welcome to the show, sir.
thank you.
So, Mr. Venkatesh, I would want to start with you. You have been filing extensive RTI applications on this issue. What we find is that the BLOs in Karnataka have not been adequately trained and they themselves are misguiding voters regarding a lot of technicalities. And when people are in doubt and they want to clarify whatever problems they have, the response from ECI has not been very effective or appreciable. So, first of all, why do you think there is this lack of clarity on this issue, and has the ECI done enough to ensure that people's problems are solved?
It's a very basic question to start this discussion with. When you are launching an exercise of such an astronomical nature, it's huge, crores of people to be covered. One would expect that there would be some basic training materials explaining what the BLO should be doing to start with, and then what the electoral registration officer should be doing with regard to claims and objections. And the minimum expectation is that some of those training materials will be available in the local language. So this is one of the RTIs that I had filed with the Election Commission of India, asking for a copy of the training materials for BLOs and EROs and in which languages they have been prepared. And if so, give me a copy of that. You would be very surprised to know they just gave me a PowerPoint presentation in English which gives some basic idea about what the BLO should be doing. There is no mention of anything about the duties and responsibilities of EROs, particularly when they have to decide on the claims to be included or objections for the inclusion of some citizen in the voter list. None of that is there. And they simply said that we do not have training materials in any languages. The Election Commission itself has not prepared any training materials. They've given that in writing in the RTI applications reply to me. Instead, what they've done is they have set up this institute which is called IIIDEM. It's an Institute for Democracy and Election Management based in Delhi, which they 100% finance. And that PowerPoint is prepared by them, which is not even part of the Election Commission. So the question that needs to be asked is, when people have so many queries, so many complications, I myself have several of them because I'm yet to register myself, enumerate myself, in this process. Beyond telling people how forms should be filled up, the other intricacies, the other complexities that arise with existence or absence of progeny mapping, spelling errors, mismatch, names are there in one particular year's voter list but not in the 2002 list. There is no clarity about any of this. That's the reason why this whole exercise is being conducted in an atmosphere that is so muddled and so confusing. I really doubt whether we will have much clarity with regard to the sanctity and the reliability of the voter list at the end of this process.
As you were saying, this indeed is an astronomical exercise, right? So, what exactly do you think has been the preparation from EC's side before going ahead with this? What has been the budget of this program and how have they been able to implement it so far?
Very fundamental questions. That was the other set of questions that I asked the Election Commission prior to the commencement of the SIR3 phase. And I said that how many such training programs have you conducted? The answer is we don't have the information. So who's been training the BLOs at what level? There's no clarity about that. A basic requirement of any parliamentary democracy is before an executive branch of the state spends any money, there has to be parliamentary approval for it, and that comes through the budget, either through the original budget estimate presented in the budget session or through the revised estimates that get presented during the middle of the financial year.
Correct.
There is nothing that the Election Commission can show. First of all, the Election Commission's budget, which is part of the budget of the Ministry of Law and Justice in the central government, it doesn't have a specific object head saying special intensive revision of roles. And then when I asked the Election Commission a specific question, please tell me what is the object head under which you secured parliamentary approval for SIR 1 and SIR 2. I didn't ask about SIR 3 because this RTA was filed before this exercise began. There was no answer. The only response that they gave me was that some 1978 circular which says that the exercise of revising electoral rolls, the financial expenditure incurred will be met with on a 50-50 basis by the center and the states. Now that's fine, that's a principle, but how much money have you actually obtained permission to spend? That is not there. And I wouldn't be surprised if the state governments which are going through these SIR phases 1, 2 and 3, whether they have even budgeted for any of this. So the question that comes again is, first of all, there is lack of clarity about the legal sanction for a special intensive revision, as a good friend Clifton would tell you later. But where is the financial approval for this from Parliament or from the state legislatures? It's a question mark, and unfortunately not enough people have been asking this question. They need to ask this question, and particularly ask the members of Parliament of the ruling alliance as to when did you approve the budget for this.
So one thing I would want to ask both of you is that ever since the SIR process began in Bihar, now it has been rolled out in multiple states, more than 5 crore people have been excluded from the electoral list, the new electoral list. And now it's not just their voting rights they are losing, as it turns out now. They are also losing their access to welfare schemes, as has been announced by several BJP ruled states, as well as, quite surprisingly, the Karnataka government headed by Congress. We'll come to that later, but one thing is for sure here, that there are other consequences also for people who are missing out of this list. So Mr. Clifton, I want to ask you, is the electoral roll prepared by the EC going to be only to determine who gets to vote or not, or will it also have other ramifications? What is the legal position on this?
I think actually before answering that, I'd like to condole the families of the 4 BLOs who lost their lives, including a very young woman in her mid-20s who died in an accident outside Nelamangala, and 3 others who died because of heart attacks. I think when we are talking about BLOs and a lot of fingers are being pointed at them, we forget that the kind of pressure that they are being put under, this entire, within this 1 month capsule, each BLO has to visit anywhere between 1,200 to 1,500 households. So I think, let us just bear that in mind when we talk about the BLOs. Sure. The second thing I really want to say is just a kind of this thing of information. I mean, Mr. Nayak is talking about information. This is a project where there is a lack of information. So SIR, there is no one SIR. The SIR that was announced on 24th of June and that took place in the state of Bihar is very different from the SIR that took place in the other states after that. Is very different from the SIR that finally took place in West Bengal. We don't know what version of SIR is going to happen in Bangalore. Right. What you have now is the basic stuff. That is your enumeration form. You fill it in 1 month. You have to try and track it to the progeny. But of course, now we've been told by the Chief Election Commissioner yesterday that even if you don't map it to the 2002 rolls, it's fine. You can still submit it. Yeah. So this is now another new version of SIR. So I think let us keep this in mind. This very important process through which you're subjecting the entire country, and there is really no. Forget about the legal mandate. I'm not going to get into that. But there is no clear kind of a protocol on how this should be done. I don't know for a fact whether logical discrepancy is going to be implemented in Karnataka or not. Right. We don't know.
No official clarification.
There's nothing. So I think let's keep all of that in mind. I think from there, then when you look at what's happening and these kind of threats that are being given out, I see this is a matter of grave concern. People in our country, generally speaking, having documents is not a very easy task. Yeah. When this entire mapping exercise was happening, we kind of, we went and we met with the chief election officer, Mr. Anbukumar, and we told him that, see, for instance, look at Adivasi communities. So there's this community known as the Paniyas, Yarva Paniyas in Kodugu. Most of them literally live in bonded labor kind of situations in the coffee estates. They have no documents. Their name could be something, but what name is there in a election card, if they have it, will be something else. In 2002, they or their parents would have been working as laborers in some estate. Now they're working in some other estate. There's just absolutely nothing that they have to do the mapping. We brought that to the attention. Transgender persons from the transgender community, what's going to happen to them? How are they going to show this? So we said that there are all these vulnerable communities which are not going to be able to ensure that their names get on the SIR. So you have to have a different way to ensure that they get. It's your duty to ensure somebody is on the list. Now you've not done that. And on the other hand, you have in Bihar the chief minister threatening that your bank accounts will be, will be confiscated. In West Bengal, they've gone ahead and said that you're not even going to have any
welfare schemes.
We'll talk about our chief minister later, but I just wanted to read to you what the Supreme Court says in the recent judgment. So it's just, bear with me, it's just a few lines. So the Supreme Court said that the Election Commission is empowered to, in the exercise of its constitutional mandate, to undertake a limited inquiry into citizenship for the purpose of satisfying itself as to the eligibility for inclusion in the electoral roll. Such an inquiry does not amount to a determination of citizenship in the strict sense, and any action taken pursuant thereto is confined to electoral consequences alone. What the Supreme Court has said, A, that this is not a citizenship determination exercise, B, even if you don't get into it, the consequences are only that your name is not going to be in the list, nothing more. The consequences of such a determination is correspondingly limited. It affects the individual's entitlement to be included in the electoral roll and thereby the right to participate in the electoral process. It does not, however, operate to divest the individual of claims of citizenship, nor does it foreclose a determination of that question by a competent authority. Supreme Court has said this very clear. But see, this is the entire thing of SIR, right? I mean, it is NRC through the background, and this is what the BJP is going to utilize it to do.
Does it then mean that what these successive multiple governments are doing across the country, linking SIR with welfare schemes, are you trying to say that this is illegal?
Patently illegal, and I'll say it's illegal also for one more reason. Let us even assume that somebody is, say, from another country. Say somebody is from Nepal, they're working in India. Somebody is from Tibet, they have come into India, and obviously we welcome people. Or somebody is from Bangladesh and they are in India. Our constitution also provides protection to non-citizens.
Correct.
Article 14, Article 21 and Article 23. It would be a dying shame in our country if we are going to say it's fine, we are going to starve Bangladeshis to death because we think they are quote unquote illegal immigrants. That really cannot be the country that all of us will have to be proud of. It is also against the constitutional mandate. I must tell you, there was this judgment a few years ago, maybe a decade or more ago, Chandrima Das, basically she, a lady from Bangladesh, she was raped in West Bengal. And a lawyer moved the High Court saying that, this is a violation of her fundamental rights, and she was raped in the railway station, so she should be given compensation. That case gets dismissed, it goes to the Supreme Court. It's a very famous judgment where the Supreme Court actually says she is entitled to compensation because Article 21 is something that inures in favor of every single person who resides within the boundaries of our country. That's the law laid down by the Supreme Court. So these statements that are being made, not only are they inhuman, they are totally unconstitutional. This cannot be the kind of country that we are, aiming to be.
That's a very good point you make, and if I may add, from what I know, even certain parts of the right to constitutional remedies, if it concerns these parts of Article 14, 21 and 23, perhaps even these persons who are not Indian citizens have that fundamental right to go and approach the High Court or Supreme Court.
Definitely they do, but I mean, as a word of caution here, this is an hypothetical issue that we are talking about. Till now, neither the Election Commission nor the Union Government has said how many quote unquote illegal immigrants have been identified. Not a single figure has been given. if this entire exercise was motivated on this, lakho sankhya mein, ಸಾವಿರಾರು ಬಾಂಗ್ಲಾದೇಶಿಗಳು ನಮ್ಮ ಊರಿಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ, then where is those figures? What is it that you have to show? You've done SIR now in so many states, 16 or odd states. Put out the figures. Put out the figures of the number of people that you've identified from other countries, and it will have to be not just Bangladesh. People from other countries would mean Nepali. People from other countries would also mean somebody who's come from Tibet as well. But those figures are not there. So we are talking about non-citizens having rights, but when you come to the SIR, the entire what they trumpeted across the entire country, those figures are still not out.
Right.
You don't know, I don't know. Election Commission is not even speaking of it.
Right.
May I just add to this point? There was another RTI application that I had filed, specifically with the Chief Electoral Officer of Bihar, asking about the number of people whom they have identified as those who are ineligible to be on the electoral rolls. And let me tell you, district after district has given me a reply saying no such information or data exists with us. So the whole question that the philosophical foundation that was used to prop up the SIR exercise across the country to start with in Bihar, the data doesn't bear out anything unless there is something that the Election Commission or the Chief Electoral Officer of Bihar simply doesn't want to share with the country. Why not? After spending taxpayers' money on this whole exercise, why are you fighting shy of showing data that will prove your thesis that yes, there are ineligible people? There was another RTI application that I filed with the Election Commission asking, there is a provision in the election related laws and rules which says that if any officer who has a certain duty to perform under these laws and rules does not perform that duty according to its letter and spirit of the law or the rules, then that person can be punished, but of course with the sanction of the Election Commission. So I said, tell me, so far, what action has been taken against the electoral registration officers or other people who are responsible for bringing in ineligible people onto the voter list? Election Commission has no data. So where is the premise, the statistical premise, the numerical premise on the basis of which you set up this whole structure? We are only hearing words, phraseology and language that घुसपैठियाँ है. तो ठीक है, आपको if you know that there are घुसपैठियास, infiltrators, tell us how many have you found. Maybe before the SIR you couldn't identify, you couldn't put a number to it, but after the SIR you should have been able to do it. But instead what is happening in the name of giving effect to this, to the realization of this philosophy that we are going to clean up the electoral rolls, there is so much of trauma, so much of mental agony that people who are supposed to be subjected to this exercise going through, and like Clifton is pointing out, the duty holders at the ground level, at the cutting edge level, who have to ensure the success of this exercise, they are going through mental anguish, they are going through extreme pressure. So what is being gained out of all of this is a big question.
So are you saying that the SIR has failed to achieve its primary goal?
We don't have data to show that. What was the primary goal? Clean up the electoral rolls, get the infiltrators out, get the ineligible people out. So now let us say you take the example of West Bengal. Data says that there are 21 lakh people whose appeals are pending before the appellate tribunal set up under the orders of the Supreme Court to determine whether they should or should not be on the electoral rolls, because the final rolls of the SIR do not include them. So now who are these people? Are they infiltrators? The most famous example is that of a gentleman, Mr. Rajagopalan, who spent 30 years in journalism. He was the editor-in-chief of Telegraph, one of the most well-known newspapers of this country. He can't get a passport because his name is not there on the SIR roll. How much more Indian can you get? His name is very seemingly non-Islamic, non-Christian. I wouldn't want to call it Hindu because I don't know what religion he's professing. So why is he not on the electoral rolls? What was his reason why he was thrown out? There are so many such cases.
Now, when we come to this aspect of logical discrepancy, which was used in West Bengal, which was not there in Bihar, but later came into being in West Bengal, there are fears in Karnataka as well that lakhs and lakhs of voters could be categorized under this category of logical discrepancy, and they would then have to produce documents to show that they are voters. So first of all, in Bengal there were 4 criteria, but we don't know how many will be included in Karnataka. It could be discrepancies in names, it could be age difference between parents and their children, and lot of things like this. Does this actually mean that also because a lot of BLOs are themselves misguiding people, knowingly or unknowingly. So does this mean that somewhere a big share of the population lands up in this situation for no mistake of their own?
I think, see, we have to go back to the constitution for this. What did the constitution promise this country? It promised a universal adult franchise.
Correct.
Prior to Indian getting independence, you did have some amount of elections that happened, but it was people who were landed, who paid taxes, rich basically, who had the right to vote.
Very small percent, 10%, 12%.
Yes, and the entire, if you go through the debates in the Constituent Assembly, it's remarkable debates where you have one section of people saying that how can you allow every single person to vote in this country? It's a very responsible act. Few people should only have this right. And you have people like Baba Sahib Ambedkar who really push it through and say that voting is for every single person. So this right to vote is a right that you can almost say that it's one of the fundamental products of the freedom struggle. Right. That's what it gave to a person. Now when you are putting people through this entire rigmarole and making entry into the voter list such a huge problem, see, that really betrays the fundamental aspect of why FSR is happening. I don't like to use the word infiltrator. I don't think any human being should ever be referred to in that kind of language. Even if you're saying that you want to identify non-citizens, if that was one, that's even that purpose of yours, like we said, that is something that you're not able to show that it's been done. You look at also the way SIR is being changed, it's morphing from state to state. And if you, why was SIR, this logical discrepancy, why did you bring it in West Bengal? It's very clear. Because when the numbers of those who were not able to who fell out of in the draft roll, if you look at the religious kind of background of them, and then you'll see that it was predominantly from the dominant religions. It wasn't from your minorities. So you then introduce something like logical discrepancy. It was only 4 categories. Karnataka, I think it's going to be some 11 possible categories. Like say, I'll tell you my name is Clifton D. Rosario, and it can be spelt in any which way, anywhere at all. If you're going to go only on spelling mistakes, it's not just Christians, any person, you're going to face that problem. So logical discrepancy now you've brought in, 28 lakh people or more pending in West Bengal. The High Court the other day made this comment that it's going to take 21 years for that. Right. Now what's going to happen to you? So for 21 years you're not going to vote. And for 21 years your rights as a citizen in this country is going to depend on the vagaries of the political powers that sit in your state. And
for 21 years, I may not even have welfare scheme.
Which is what I'm saying. So supposing you have a communal kind of a regime, a political regime, then your fundamental rights are going to get suspended. You will not get any of these welfare schemes. So I think people need to understand that if anything, this is probably one of the most concerted attacks on the Constitution. Not just of your citizenship, but also your basic right to live with dignity in this country. You're making people go through such a difficult process. Previously, if you remember, Election Commission used to go from house to house, run campaigns for people's names to be included in the electoral rolls. That's the proactive. Now it is saying that we are going to put all these hoops, and everyone who can only go through all of these hoops, you will be able to enter the list. Otherwise, we will not let you enter the list. So the effort is not to include. The effort is to make it as difficult as possible for people to get in, so that ultimately people will vote in a particular way. If you look at the last Lok Sabha elections, there was a grand kind of declaration of some, we are going to win so many seats.
400 plus.
Yes, 400 seats, and people stopped here at 240. Despite you owning the Election Commission of India, despite you using every single trick to disarm the opposition, despite you using every single agency to put opposition leaders into prison, breaking opposition parties, you still ended up at 240. And then you said, okay, fine, if the voters are not going to choose us, we'll choose who the voters are.
Okay.
That is what SIR is.
But tell me one thing, speaking of these opposition parties that you referred to, one thing that I can't understand at all is the kind of position which our Chief Minister D.K. Shivakumar has taken. He's basically playing the same game which BJP Chief Ministers have played in other states. He's saying that essentially if you cannot be a part of the SIR list, then you will be excluded from welfare schemes. Now interestingly, a lot of critics, especially those who are opposing SIR, are also hailing this move by saying that DK has played a political masterstroke. Because of this, more and more people are afraid and they're getting enrolled themselves, and as a result perhaps more people are able to save their voting right than what would have been the case. So do you, Mr. Venkatesh, do you think this is actually playing out on the ground? Has Mr. D.K. Shivkumar's controversial move helped the Congress, and has it helped more people to come and enroll themselves?
Now, when I read it, my first thing, a thought was that this is a masterstroke to reduce the state's annual budget on the welfare schemes, those 5 guarantees.
Okay.
It's a very good way, because he's already started the exercise. Soon after he got sworn in, he said we are going to look at how many people who are ineligible are receiving these benefits, and that's a regular exercise that goes on practically under every scheme. In fact, we had exposed through RTI about how the PM Kisan was being used for giving benefits to lakhs and lakhs of people who are not eligible according to the scheme guidelines. Anyway, so that was something of that sort. But now, if there is a counter perspective to that, saying that okay, now this is becoming, this will be like a whip, on ordinary people to crack it, so that they will go and participate enthusiastically and committedly in this exercise. Now, I don't know. Ultimately, everything will be about how things turn out. In that context, there was this other RTI question that I had put in with the Election Commission. I said, give me a list of the criteria that you have in your records which say this is logical discrepancy, that is logical discrepancy. There is no answer to that. They've simply ignored the question. So my last point on this issue is simply this. If you look at those 2 landmark judgments, first one came in 2002 and then it was reinforced in 2003. This is the voters' right to know the background of candidates contesting elections, because of which the aspirants to MP seats, MLA seats, they have to disclose their assets, criminal antecedents, educational background and all of that. A very important paragraph in that judgment which said that the single most important office in this country is that of the citizen. Ultimately, what is democracy all about? It is people's rule. It is the expression of people's sovereign power through certain process to elect the representatives so that they can go to parliament, decide how money is spent, which people pay as taxes, and how laws are made and implemented. Right? That is the whole purpose. So the one element that makes that democracy to happen, work, is the citizen. And that citizen today is under threat of dislodgement from that office with no convincing basis, simply because there is a discrepancy. Now, my own name does not match in the EPIC card with what is there in the Aadhaar card, with what is there in the PAN card. And none of these documents I have sitting and created at home. These are all, you see, the EPIC card is the property of the Election Commission. The PAN card is the property of the Government of India Ministry of Finance. The passport is the property of the Government of India Ministry of External Affairs. So none of these documents, if they have discrepancies, are my responsibility. So why should a citizen be penalized for the mistakes that these other people made, whose salaries were paid from the citizens' money paid as taxes?
Right.
So in fact, they should be made accountable for these discrepancies.
I think just to add to that, one has to look at Mr. D.K. Shivkumar's statement, I think, in a little bit of a context as well. You look at how Congress has looked at the SIR issue. Overall, if you look at it, in Bihar, you had Mr. Rahul Gandhi, you had that, with all the other opposition parties, that mega kind of a rally through the entire state. So they've been taking a position about it. In Karnataka, when the mapping started, and from our campaign, My Vote, My Right, we did a lot of programs across the state saying that the state government is really not addressing this. And Mr. Siddaramaiah at that point had made a statement saying that we don't want to look at this from a political lens. We are looking at it for what it is. And there was a huge opposition that all of us kind of made to that. But thereafter, I think Congress has kind of changed gears. They had these huge programs for the BLAs across the state, at least, they tried to do it. And if you look at the number of BLAs that were given to the Election Commission, Congress is way ahead of BJP and JDS. It is in that context that, if you say, okay, the statement that is made, perhaps it was some kind of a threat kind of a thing, but more to say that, see, we've done what we can. Now it's your duty to try and save your your vote. So one can look at it that way. But I think somewhere, even if one is a little charitable and say that that's the reason, you then go back to what happened in West Bengal. In West Bengal, and sorry, just before that, so now they also did this PRC, this permanent residence certificate, and of course BJP is up in arms. Kumaraswamy is up in arms. They are saying that this is only brought in so that you can, you can protect so-called illegal immigrants. Now these are the things that they are doing. No, but my sense is that this narrative that is being built now in Karnataka, I think if you want to really appreciate it in its real sense, one has to understand what happened in West Bengal. Madam Mamata Banerjee was very sure that she had clinched it when SR was declared. She went to the Supreme Court, she argued herself, she did everything, she had camps, that, this and the other, and they dropped the logical discrepancy like a googly on them, and that changed everything. So I think even now, if Congress is sitting back thinking that okay, BJP is protesting because they really think that something is wrong, which I don't think is the case, I think this narrative kind of a control that the Congress believes that they have, I think that's a case of them being too confident, overconfident, and they'll probably face the same kind of situation as the TMC kind of faced in West Bengal. But ultimately then at the end of the day, the price will be paid by the people of Karnataka. And really for me, I think that's the fundamental thing. We are all citizens of this country. The presumption has always been that we have been citizens of this country. We've never had to prove our citizenship to anyone. Till now you had to prove your whatever else, but you never had to prove your citizenship. This is making every single person doubt their own citizenship. That's the disaster that this SIR is.
Yes, of course, you were also referring to this statement by the one of the high courts wherein they said it would take 21 years for all this to get settled. Obviously, if that is 21 or whatever, if it's that long it takes for all these things to be settled, what will be the situation of those people for those years and their children as well? Because from the latest information that we have, even for those who are trying to enroll themselves onto the electoral list after this process is over, for new voters under Form 6, even they now will have to give details of their parents and map themselves to 2002. So if in case there is a voter who has been left out of the rolls and they are fighting it out in different tribunals and stuff like that, that will also impact their children and basically the entire family. So it's quite worrisome, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. In fact, what you're talking about, Form 6 has been amended by the Election Commission unilaterally, without any legislative process.
Correct.
Unheard of.
Hasn't been brought under the Parliament.
No, see now we are in a situation where now Election Commission, they amended the Election Commission law. What would, if you just go back a bit, the Supreme Court passes a judgment in the Anup case saying that appointment of the election commissioners should be a transparent process. There should be a committee where you have the Chief Justice, you have the Prime Minister, you have the Leader of the Opposition. This committee what do? They bring in a law saying that it will be appointed by a committee, they throw out the Chief Justice and they bring in a nominee of the Prime Minister, which means that basically they will steamroll. They then amended the the laws relating to the Election Commission to give complete impunity, complete protection for any action that the Election Commissioners take. So the Election Commissioner is answerable to no one.
So there is no accountability.
No accountability. No, you're never going to pay the price for anything that you do. That's the legal infrastructure that the Union government, the Modi government, has brought in. So now the Supreme Court says in that judgment of which a lot of us believe is incorrect. It says that the Article 324, which basically is the powers of superintendents that are granted to the Election Commission, it literally is like an unending reservoir. They can use it to do anything and everything that they want. That's extremely dangerous. I think even for the BJP, they need to understand that they may be in power today. But 30, 40 years ago, you had something called the emergency that took place in this country. So any party is capable of a kind of an excess. You are safe if the rule of law is strengthened in this country. You are safe if the infrastructure, the institutions of democracy, the institutions of accountability and transparency are protected in this country. That's how not just you and me are safe, even they will be safe. So if they think that this is like a 1,000-year rake, even Hitler couldn't survive that long. So no one's going to survive that long. So anyone's best bet is a system where the rule of law prevails. That is something I think even the ruling party today needs to realize.
Okay, thank you. So, as you saw, this has been the situation in Karnataka nearly 2 weeks after SIR began. We'll be tracking this issue closely in the coming weeks as well to see how things pan out and whether things will get any easier for the citizens in Karnataka. Thank you very much, Mr. Clifton and Mr. Venkatesh, for joining us, and
thank you for inviting us.
For giving us so many insightful comments. Keep watching Deccan Herald's YouTube channel for more such insightful content.